Hey friends, welcome. It is week 2, lecture 1. That means it's our third lecture. And it also means we are beginning to be done with half of our stack. None of those a very confusing statement, but there's 4 weeks. We're starting week 2. So at the end of this week, we will be halfway done with our stack. I know that's gone by fast, but as they always say, when you're having fun, time flies, or time flies when you're having fun. So a couple things. We got a really busy day today, so I want to make sure that we jump into stuff. By the end of this lesson, we're going to talk about our week 2 core assignments. As always, I always want to give those to you. We're going to make our assignment notebooks awesome. So just a little bit of tips that helps me grade even faster. And then just things that, tips that you guys can do. We're going to explain the date and requirements for taking the belt exam. I'm just going to really lightly touch on this. We're going to talk much more about it next week because it's actually going to be belt exam week. We're going to talk about indexing a data frame. We're going to talk about loc and iloc and have a specific, data frame that we can bring that to. We're going to filter rows from a subset of data that matches a pattern. So we're going to start looking at filtering, and then we're going to use pandas string methods to create filters based on string patterns, which are going to come in really handy whenever we're starting to deal with cleaning our data. Just as always, you've got 3 core assignments. You've got loading and filtering data, Titanic data, and Project 1 Part 2. You all received an email from me probably 30 minutes ago that said that I finished your grading. I finished all assignments, and with that, it also had a feedback document sheet attached to that. That should be yours. If that's not yours, I messed up. It should be. I checked to make sure, even though I didn't touch it. So it should be yours. If it's somebody else's, please let me know immediately. You guys did amazing on your assignment, so way to go. Really happy you guys crushed it. If I didn't say anything, that doesn't mean that you didn't do anything. It just means I don't have anything to add. You did it very well. I love seeing the creativity. If you did something creative or use something different, then I tried to comment there. But if you didn't get any feedback, that just means you crushed it. You did really well. I really don't have anything to add because that's exactly how I would have done it. One thing to note is that if you did miss, I don't know that anybody did this, but if you ever, just as a reminder, if you don't do your assignments, then you will be placed on academic probation. You get 3 of those for the entire stack, not stack, sorry, entire cohort. So make sure you don't do that. But I think everybody was great there. Cool. Also, with that in the email, it does say, as a reminder, these are submitted this Friday now at 9 a.m. So it's no longer Sunday, it's Friday. We talked about that last week. Just want to really reiterate that along with your resubmits. If you need, a little bit of time with the resubmits because I give them to you on Tuesday, that's fine. Just reach out to me. Communication to me is always going to be more important and always going to help. So if there ever is anything, it's that old saying of asking for forgiveness than permission does not really apply here. Ask for permission. I will always be way more lenient than if you were to text, email me on Tuesday and be like, my bad. Now here's the assignments, because I can't really work with that. Cool. Just some little tips and tricks that what you guys can do to help is you guys can add comments. A lot of you guys did really well at this. I just always like to do this after the first week of assignments. Little things that you can do, like adding an assignment header. So basically you can add different things called markdown. So if you want to learn more about how to make something, bolder or, have these certain dots, you can look up markdown or MD documentation, and that'll teach you how to do a ton of fun things. But the idea behind it is, and again, you guys did really good at this, having code comments helps me understand. So when I'm grading, I can just go and say, oh, this is the question that they're answering and this is their answer. So it helps me, associate that rather than just looking at code. And sometimes I'm scrambling and, I know the assignments well enough that I can be like, oh, I think that's what they're trying to do here. But, it just really helps me be a little bit more efficient and also get used to commenting your code, because good commented code is readable and other people will be really grateful that you commented versus, you not, and then them trying to be like, what does this mean? So always practice comments as well. Just very quickly touching on the belt exam. The way it works is you've got 2 waves that you can take the belt exam as long as you qualify. And the way you qualify is that you have done all of week 1 and week 2 core assignments. and you've submitted those, and you've submitted all week one resubmits. So if you do that, so it's all week one and week two, you do not have to do week three core assignments before you take the test, though I will encourage it. And we're going to talk way more about that next week. But if you are qualified, then you will be able to take the first wave. Now, what will happen is on Friday, I will send out a code that's, here's your belt exam code. It will be valid through Sunday at 11:59 p.m. for you to submit it. So that's not just to open the exam at 11:59, but more so your exam must be submitted at 11:59. You might ask, Will, why are you saying this so early? Well, I understand you guys all have jobs. And so if you needed to make, some alterations, or, you have to, like I work all weekend, reach out to me as soon as possible and I'll work with you and try to find a different path for that. But I really like to just give you information ahead of time. That way you guys aren't, scrambling, trying to get somebody to cover your shift or trying to move trips around or whatever. So I try to put that as quick as possible. As always, you have to have 80% of class attendance in order to do that. And again, 90% of week one and week two core assignments. So if you're eligible, you'll get that belt exam code. Once you unlock the belt exam, you'll have 24 hours to take the exam. You can use anything you want. You can use Google, you can use lectures. The only thing you can't use is another student or a TA or an instructor. Right? So you can't use each other, but you can use literally anything else, because at the end of the day, when you're at a job and your boss gives you a task, they're not going to say, do this task, but don't use the internet. That's silly. Right? They're going to say, do it. And then, do it as best as you can. So utilize your tools, utilize your resources. You can use the login platform, anything you need there, except for TAs, students, and instructors. And then if you do take it the first wave and you actually don't pass it, you will get access to the second wave. So it's just basically another attempt. That being said, if you opt to not take it this weekend, given that you don't have a weird circumstance that you comment or you reach out to me about, if you just say, I'm just not ready, then that means you only have one attempt. So if you don't pass it, you're going to have to retake. So I would encourage everybody that's eligible, at least try it, see what it's like. There's an exam, or there's a mock belt exam that I typically will do like a bonus lecture of. That's very, very similar to the exam, hint. So, and I'll be giving you guys hints like, oh, you might really want to know this. Cough, cough. I'll say something super awkward like that because I'm recorded and don't want to get in trouble. Okay. Any questions about that real quick? Cool. You guys are easy. When will I do the mock? Somebody asked. That is next week. So mock belt exam is week 3. So probably like Wednesday, honestly, something like that. Wednesday or Friday is usually when I'll do them. No, not the lecture. It'll be something totally different. So just a bonus lecture that I'll give that's super optional, but it'll be recorded. Cool. Now I did something a little bit different these next couple of weeks where these next 2 weeks, really, we're really going to have a lot of information. And I understand that people learn differently. Most of you guys that I've talked to learn best by coding along. And that's really how I think there's some value there. I also did want to provide this to where there is actually, if you just are, you're like, actually, I really enjoy slides and PowerPoints. There is some slides here I wanted to provide for you guys. I'm not going to go through these just because there's simply not time for us to go through this and through the code. So I'm going to opt for the code piece. But if this is the way that you learn, let me know, and then I can start, sort of sprinkling these in. But I want you to have access to them as well. So if you do learn by slides, that is available. Cool. All right, friends, we are getting started with pandas. Now, there's quite a few things that we are going to do today. And this is probably too much. I don't know that we're going to get through everything. Anything we don't get through, we're going to just pick up on Thursday. Thursday is going to be really hammering on filtering and cleaning data and how that will work. So today we're just going to get sort of used to a data frame, used to filtering a little bit, and used to just sort of playing with our data. Cool. First thing you're going to have to do every single time is you're going to have to mount your data. Now, there is a way that you can make your data a URL, but I want you to get familiar with mounting your data first and foremost. So unfortunately, what that means is when you have data, or if I give you a data set or the login platform gives you a data set, you are going to have to save it. And then you're gonna have to upload it to Google Drive. Now, the way my Google Drive is set up is I've got a folder called data science. I'll just show you. I've got a folder. This is my drive. I've got a folder called, and I'll show you how to mount it in just a second, but I've got a folder called data science, and in there I've got data, and that's just all of my data sets that we work with and just other data sets. You don't have to do it that way. It's just easy for me. But get used to, especially when we're mounting a drive, you're gonna have to save your data somewhere on the Google Drive. And I would encourage you save it in the specific folder. That way you know where all of your data is. Now, what do I mean by mounting my drive? Well, in order for me to even look at my data, I need to be able to access it, right? And if it's on our Google Drive, what we can do is we can, on Colab, do something called mounting our drive, which basically is giving this instance of Google Colab access to my Google Drive. So unfortunately, you are going to have to do this every single time. It's not a general, let's give it access once and then forever Google Colab has it. You will have to do it every specific time because there's specific instances of Google Colab. But what you'll do is, if you don't see this guy right here, what you're going to do is you're going to click this folder to my left. And then right here, you're going to click this guy right here called Mount Drive. Now, when you do that, this will show up. So that's how you'll mount your drive. You'll run this, and then it's going to ask for access to your Google Drive. It's going to say, I'd like to do some certain things, and you just say, yes, I want to give access to it. And then this code will show up. Cool. Any questions on mounting your drive? Cool. Now, that's just us giving Colab access to our Google Drive. Now we actually want to see our data. So there's a couple things we can do. Here, I have to import pandas. Pandas is the library we're going to use to view our data. We saw NumPy and how we can deal with arrays, but pandas is going to be the next step. It allows us to do something called data frames, which is a multi-dimensional array that allows us basically to view our data almost like an Excel file, but it allows us to do so many things with dealing with columns and dealing with data. So pandas is the GOAT really with dealing with data. So if I want to use it, I'm going to import pandas as PD. Somebody asked, does Google Colab have to be open in the same drive we get our data set from? So you'll actually just do it through here. Once you mount your drive, it's going to do this. You'll have to maybe sometimes refresh this, and then it'll just pull up drive right here. So your Google Drive doesn't have to be up, because then you can just navigate it here, just like this, to your data science data. And then here's all of your data. So we imported pandas. Now, I also want to specify which data set I want to use. The way we're going to do that, there's two ways you can do it. I like to create a file or a variable called file path. You don't have to do that. You could take this guy and paste it in right here, and it would work the exact same way. I just like to make a variable because I think it looks much, much nicer. But the way you're going to get this guy right here is you're going to go to whichever data set you're dealing with. Here, we're dealing with our Titanic data set, and see these three dots right here. You're going to click that, and you're going to say copy path. Now, if I paste this, you see that I get this path right here. This is a path in my content drive. Cool. So I mounted my drive. I'm in my drive. I'm in a folder called data science. I'm in that. Within that folder, there's a folder called data, and it's just basically a pathway to that specific data set. But notice that it does not come as a string. So I do need to make sure, and I can do double or single, it does not matter. Whenever you are passing it in, whether this way, whether if you just copy and pasted it, like I could do this, or I could do it this way. Either one works, but just make sure it's a string. And then now when I do that, I run this, I've imported pandas, I've got this guy. Now I have created what we call a data frame. So I ran pandas. So PD, within PD or within pandas, there is a read CSV. That is basically saying, I want to read this data. Now CSV is the type. We can see that this is Titanic CSV. There are other ones. So there's an Excel, there's a ton. You can do like SQL. See how this says XLSX? That would be an Excel file. Pandas has a pd.read Excel. So depending on what file type, you want to say to read either CSV or read Excel. Those are really the two that we're going to deal with, but Pandas does have flexibility for more. And then we're going to actually pass the file. So we're saying, I want you to read this file, and I want you to create what we call a data frame. And we can see that when we created a data frame, if I just say DF, because Google Colab will automatically, print the last thing in my cell, then here you actually see it created what we call a data frame, where it's got these columns and these rows, this column of passenger ID, of survived, of P class, of name, sex, age, et cetera, et cetera. And then these certain rows, right, where I've got 0, 1, 2, 3, et cetera, et cetera. This is an index created by Pandas, and you can see how we have another ID right here, which we might look at here in just a second. But this is what a data frame is, just very, very rough. We tell Pandas to create a data frame. I call it DF. That's pretty common. You can call it whatever you want. If you wanted to call it Titanic_DF, that would also work. If you just wanted to call it Titanic, that would work. Usually you want to indicate that this is a data frame, because there is something else called a series, which I don't think we'll touch on today, but that is just a little bit different. So we want to specify which type of what are we working with here? Any questions on us just loading in and reading our data just at the very beginning? Does this make sense? Because you just put a 1 if this makes sense, put a 0 if it does not. Somebody asked, should we always go through the drive, or can we just upload? I would encourage you to go through the drive, just because it'll be persistent as well. So if you wanted to, access it in another, like, let's say your computer breaks and that data is just on your computer, and all of a sudden you spill water on it. Now you don't have access to that data. It's just that idea of putting it in the cloud. But you can absolutely upload it from a computer, just from like a, like if you just uploaded it here, you could do that, but I would get used to doing something like this. But great question. Cool. Okay, so if we're looking at this, let's say I've got this data right here, just looking at our data. A header is our top row. So in this case, we've got this, this is row 0, and this is the titles or the values of my column. So here we've got passenger ID, survived, P class, right? These are the names of my column. And normally, especially with the data that we're going to be dealing with, that's going to come, nice and easy. But sometimes there is data that we're dealing with where the headers are not automatically row 0. So here, just to point out, you can identify which header you want to do, which row. In this case, if I don't pass in a value, like as an argument, so, these are doing the same thing. That's because if I don't pass in an argument of header equals anything, then it's going to automatically default to header equals 0. Okay. So you might say, well, what does that mean? Well, if I'm dealing with something like this, or header none, then what I'm saying is I don't want you to, I don't want you to identify or assume that 0 is my header. In fact, I just want it 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera, et cetera. So I can't say header equals none, and we're not really going to deal with that, but just want to show that that is absolutely an option that you can do. You can pass in that argument. Or here I've got just another data set where you actually see, or just another version of this, where you see that my header is actually 1. So even if I were to say something like this, where, here this headers, I passed in my file, but it automatically defaulted to unnamed 0, example CSV, unnamed, unnamed, unnamed. I can identify which row I want to be the header for my columns. The way I do that is it's 0. It's sort of interesting how this is 0. This top one is 0, even though this says 0, 0, 1, 2, right? Sort of how a list works. So if I were to say something like this, df equals pd.readcsv, I pass in my value, but then I say header equals 2. Now I've got the correct header. So sometimes when I'm dealing with my data, I'm not going to throw you a curveball in the belt exam like that, but sometimes when I am dealing with data, the headers might be off a little bit, or you might deal with, somebody tried to clean it up and then the way they saved it or something messed up everything. So I can dictate where my header is by passing in this argument. Again, if I don't pass in that argument, it defaults to 0. So here we see that. Any questions on that? Questions on headers? Does that make sense? Cool. That's just something, again, you probably aren't going to deal with that for the rest of this stack at least. I can't think of an assignment that you're really going to deal with that, but just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. Okay. So the first thing that you are going to do, and just know that these are going to build on top of each other, whether it's through here to the belt exam or here to the next stack, is I would sort of get used to doing certain things whenever you load in a data set. And the first thing I want you to do is just start getting used to, what is in your data set. So if I created df, so I'm actually going to rerun this guy. I guess it doesn't matter because they're all the same. Okay. So if I wanted the first and the last first five and the last 5 rows within my data frame, I can just say df. And if I do that, it's going to get me the first 5 and the last 5. Cool. It's also going to give me some extra values. It's going to give me, some of the column names, or the column names. It's going to give me how many rows there are by how many columns. And I can sort of just see, okay, it starts at 0. There's 890. Okay, I'm starting to just get familiar with my data. That's going to be crucial when you get to the belt exam. You're going to have to spend a little bit just getting familiar with your data. And then on Thursday, we're going to look at, okay, let's get familiar. Now let's clean our data. But if I just wanted to get the first 5, I didn't want the last 5. Does anybody know what I would do? Anybody that far yet?
Head.
Tail.
That what?
Tail.
That tail is going to be one of the answers of my questions, but not quite the first 5.
Oh, dot head. I thought you said
That head, yeah. So if I say df, and that's again because I named my data frame df. If I would have called it Titanic df, I would say Titanic _ df. I'm going to say df dot head. And I pass it. And this will give me the first 5. Cool. What if I wanted the top 8? What could I do?
You could put an 8 in those parentheses for your df.head.
Yeah, absolutely I can. So what I can do is I can say df.head. And then within this, I can pass in an argument of however many I want. So in this case, I have 8. So it's going to give me the first 8. If I wanted to say 11, I could say that. Either one, I can pass in whatever value. If I wanted 23, and it's going to give me the first 23 rows, right? I can pass in any sort of number as long as it's within the bounds of my, as long as it's within the bounds of my 890. Really, I could have 875 and it would work just fine. Now, one thing I see in chat, and I think that this is probably defaulted, but one thing to note is this is different than this. It is case sensitive. So, if you do a lowercase df, just make sure if you are getting an error, check your cases, because that can cause an issue. And I've seen that a million times. All right, Miranda, if I want the bottom 5, what do I want to do? Or was it Ashley, the one that answered?
Oh, sorry. D is going to, you want Ash?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It's going to be the df dot head, and then in parentheses, it'll be a 5 to give you your bottom 5.
If I wanted the bottom 5, what am I?
Tail.
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 There we go. Yep. And I actually don't have to pass a 5, just like in the same way that head by default, if I don't pass in a value, it's by default going to give me 5. Tail does the same thing. Tail will give me the bottom 5 values within my data set. And if I wanted the bottom 11, it works the same way. I can say tail, where I pass in 11. And then this gives me the last 11. Now, sometimes I will want to just get familiar with my data. And I can say something like this. I can say df.sample. And that is just going to give me 5. Whoa. Should have given me 5. Oh, I got to pass in. Sorry. If I just pass in sample, it gives me 1. Sorry, I got confused. It'll only give me 1 random value. If I run it again, it gives me another random value. And I can pass in as many random values as I want. So in this case, it's 5. Sample defaults to 1. And if I run this again, we can see it gives me, oh, it's going to take a second. Cool. It gives me a different random 5. So if I did just want to start looking at my data, I can do that as well. Any questions on that?
Yeah, question.
Yeah.
So for this DF sample, does it randomly sample like out like the entire data set, or can you kind of specify like a certain range for your data set?
You can specify, but that'll be a little bit more complicated. When we start looking at filtering and iLook, we could specify that.
Okay.
But this is going to be the entire data frame.
Okay. So there's like no additional criteria that can be inputted in order to like sample from a data set that meets a certain criteria, correct?
Let's check.
Maybe my question.
I would say
That makes more
there's
sense.
ways to get around that. Like we can create a filter and then get a sample from that filter. Like if I created a new data frame from that, I could absolutely do .sample, because data frame
Okay.
as itself is, you can think of it as a class, right? And then it has .sample. So if I have any sort of, when we're looking at like checking our data types or checking certain columns, if I create them as a data frame, then I can run .sample on anything I want to filter.
Okay, so it'd probably just be more easier just to create a new data frame with the selected criteria and then perform a sample that way.
That would be much, much, much easier. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah. Great question though. Anybody else have any other questions? I know we're kind of cruising. If I'm going too fast, just let me know. Somebody asked about missing data. That's what we're going to handle on Thursday, cleaning data. So we're just getting used to our data now, filtering our data, and then we're going to deal with cleaning data on Thursday. Identifying and cleaning data. Any other questions? Great questions today, guys. Am I going too fast? Can you just put a 1 in the chat if I'm at a good speed? Put a anything else if you're like, hey, slow down just a little bit. Cool. Okay. Another really important thing, cough, cough, something to really note is you're going to have to know what data types our columns are. That is going to be something, cough, cough, really important for you to note. Get used to doing this. If I want to just, there's a couple of different ways I can do that. If I'm wanting just to get a, bunch of information about sort of my data, and this is one that I will always run. Basically, I do like .head and then I do .info, like sort of in that order. If I say df.info and I run this, this is going to give me a ton of information. First, it's going to give me the data type. Well, not first, but one of the things it gives me is the data type. So here's an int, object, float. Object is also like a string. So if it's a string value, that's going to be really important to know if you keep that in mind. Just if there's something's an object or if, whatever. So it tells you the different type. It also tells you your values and how many are not null. So if I see that I've got 891, and that'll tell me 891 entries, and here I see 714, and here I see 204, what does that tell me? Does anybody know?
Pretty much means there's either missing values or invalid values that don't pertain to the data type.
Well, not even, because if something's wrong with the data type, it will, like if, let's say I've got a number and somebody accidentally passes in like a string, like instead of saying 21, they actually type out 21. it'll make my entire column a data type object. But what this is doing is saying these are null values, means that we have missing data. 714 of them are good, but that means we're missing however many, 177 or however, whatever the value is, 87, missing values for age, a lot more for cabin, and a lot more for embarked. And so when we're doing this, we can sit and say, okay, well, man, a lot of my data, like I don't even have 24% of my data for cabin. Is this a good column for me to even have? Does this tell me anything? What could be a reason why I'm missing that data? Embarked looks like I'm only missing 2. So it's like, okay, I can look into those and identify that. Age, I can identify and say, what do I want to deal? How do I want to deal with this? One thing just to note, we're going to talk about this on Thursday, but we want to keep as much data as we can. Sometimes I see, especially in these assignments, this week's assignments, is where people just, if there's a null value, you just drop the column. Don't do that. Exhaust every other option. And we're going to talk about that on Thursday. Some other options where you can take maybe the mean age and just fill that in, or you can, do something else with that value. But this also shows me the different columns, the different data types that are within there. How many do I have for object and for float? Int 64, it tells me how many entries, and it tells me I have 12 total columns. So it gives me a lot of information. And sometimes it might make sense to just do something like save info equals df.info, because I might use that in other ways. Okay, so it gives me back one other thing to note. Nope, that's it. I don't have anything else to note, actually. Let's say I didn't want all of that information and I just wanted to see the data types. I can do that as well. So instead of showing you and then creating the variable, I'm just going to create the variable equals. And then what I'm going to say is if I just want to see the data types, I don't care about the rows or anything like that. I can say d types. And then let me, oops. Oops, sorry. My variable is called saved d type. Did not like that. If I just do data types, this is going to give me back all this information. Now, if I were to say something like type, and this is going to come in really next week. I just want to hit this. This creates what we call a series, and that's a one-dimensional array that allows me to see and do different things, where I can deal with, again, if I just look at my saved data types, I've got this different piece right here. It's just a pandas series, and it's going to allow me to do different things, especially when I want to iterate through, or if I want to do some sort of for loop, I will be able to do that. Okay. Perfect. Let's say I wanted to get all of my object data types. I want to get all of my string. What I could do is I could say saved d types. Now I want to filter, and we haven't gotten there quite yet, but basically what I want to do is I want to say saved d types equals object. And what that's going to do is that's going to get me back all of the columns that are of type object. Again, that's going to come in really, really in handy next week. Cool. What this is doing right here is I'm taking this save d types, the series, and I can do some sort of arithmetic on it, basically, to where I can create a condition. My condition is I only want the d types that equal object. So what this is going to do is this is iterating through basically and just slicing out all of the values that have of type object and excluding excluding all the ones that do not have that. Does that make sense? Is there a question on that? Any questions on that? If I wanted to check a specific column, I could say something like df, and then I can pass it in that actual column name. And then I can say dot d type. It tells me that this is a float 64. What happens if I just do this? Let's see. If I just get, I probably should have shown you this ahead of this. My bad. If I take my data frame and I do my brackets and I pass in the column, it will just get me the values from that column. This gets me all the values for my fair. I've got one for sex, male, female. Let's see, what else do I have? I've got name. I can do name. This is a way that's called slicing, right? To where I can get, I have my massive data frame and I only want a slice of it, a portion of it. The way I do that is I say my data frame, a bracket, I pass in the column name, and then I close my bracket, and then it gives me all that information. It's just getting a simple little piece of my data frame. Does that make sense? We're
Can
gonna talk
you
about.
can you
Go
create?
ahead.
Are you essentially creating like a new a DF that you can interact with? Like, say you wanted to know how many of the passengers were female specifically. Are you like
So-
creating a new data type that then you can reference? Like instead of name, it'll be sex with a an equation you wanted to figure out.
Let's see what type this is. This is a Pandas series.
Okay.
So this isn't a data frame, but yes, you can. We will when we get to filtering, I'm going to show you how to do that exact thing. To where if I wanted just maybe all females over 60, I can do that. And then now I'm just working with specifically that data. And I can create that as a new data frame, or I could do something different. So yeah, I can absolutely accomplish that.
You're just
specifically-
filtering out the existing data
Mhm.
frame. You're not creating a new
Mhm.
one.
Yeah.
It's not like arrays or
Mhm.
anything like that.
Mm-mm. Nope.
Okay. Got it.
Cool. But we will get to when we deal with our loc and general loc, we will do that exact thing. And then moving forward, especially when we're cleaning data, when we change it, we can do that exact thing. So yeah, absolutely. Okay. So it's really important to know also just how many rows and columns. There's a couple ways you can do that. You can do this df.info like we've shown you. I can also do df.shape. So if I do df.shape, then what it will give me is just the rows and columns back. And it does do, and this is something really important. Get this in your mind, especially when we're dealing with data. Always it goes row, comma, columns. We're going to deal with that when we were dealing with our locator. It just is always rows first, then columns. So if I do shape, it gives me 891 rows, 12 columns. If I just wanted the rows, I can actually just say len of df, and that's going to give me all of the row value. Or if I just wanted the columns, I could say len of df dot columns, and it's going to give me 12. I mean, a few times maybe you'll use these, getting used to doing like a shape, or especially an info, which tells you that information is usually fine. Maybe if I'm wanting to do some math, right? Then where this number might come in. Like if I want to see what percentage of rows had missing data, maybe I would use this guy as like some sort of calculation to create a percentage. So any questions on rows and columns? Awesome. We're cruising today. It might feel like a lot today. Might feel like we went from 0 to 100 really, really, really fast. But we can, I promise with practice, this is going to get a little bit easier. Okay. So we've already seen that we can select one column and we saw, especially with Edward's question, that that can become a series. So if I said df of age, that is me getting one column as a series. But what if I did want that as a data frame? What if I wanted to be able to utilize that as a data frame? Well, it's pretty simple. All I could do is this. I say df and I do double brackets. If I do double brackets, then what that will do is I will actually create a data frame. And it actually looks a lot nicer, right? Which then allows me anything I can do on a data frame, I can do on this now. So like, let's see if I did dot shape. Let's see what that gives me. Gives me 891 with only one column because I just sliced out that specific column. But now if I do double brackets, it allows me to do anything I can, anything I've already done, dot info, dot whatever, anything I've already done with the data frame. If I do double brackets, that's me creating this as a data frame. What if I wanted multiple columns as a data frame? Anybody have any ideas? What if I
Just
what if I
a
wanted
comma.
multiple columns? Go ahead.
Use a comma.
Yeah. So let's say new df is going to equal df, double brackets. Now I can pass in age. Let's say sex and survived. Because I know that this is the Titanic and I have that. Cool. Now if I were to say something like new df, now I've got an entirely new data frame that allows me to take this information and I can do certain things with it, right? I can create, let's say I wanted in just this data frame right here, I wanted to create a filter, and the filter is just going to be a variable basically that allows us to, well, I think whenever I write it, it'll make a little bit more sense. So I'm gonna say for survived. So let's make a filter to see all of the people that survived. Once we do it, then I can explain what it's doing. Survive filter equals. Now I've got my new df. So I'm going to say new df. Then I'm going to say, I want it where the survived equals 0. So what it's doing is it's creating a filter and it's going to go through my new df, specifically my survived column. And it's going to get me, it's going to create a Boolean response basically of all of the values here that are 0. So let's see this. Cool. If I say survived filter. So this is giving me my Boolean response of false, meaning, nope, this person did survive. And then this is true, true, true. All these people unfortunately perished. But what this is doing, it's creating a filter. And this filter is specifically for all of the people that survived or didn't survive, sorry. And it creates a Boolean response of, is this condition true for this row? No, it's not. Is this true? Yes, 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 yes. No, yes, no, yes. Which will then allow us to take that filter. And when we get to our loc, we'll see, which we're actually getting to right now. And now start applying that filter to get only the rows that have that as a, as an actual, like all the people who didn't survive. Okay. So I'm going to actually deal with another data set to deal with that. Actually, no, let's, before we do that, just because I want to create a point. When I'm dealing with slicing, we saw that I can slice this way. There's another way we can do it, and it's through .loc and .iloc. There's two main differences. Basically, iloc and loc are going to be indexing tools that we can do to go through all of our data and filter, almost filter or slice it out. But there's two big differences. Our general locator allows us to pass in values or filters, and it will give us back that information. iLoc is specifically dealing with only index values. So if you look at actually our data here, remember how this is index of 0 and then 0? I have to know, if I'm going to use iLoc, I have to know the exact index position in order for me to use that, which oftentimes transparently, you're not going to know. You're not really going to know that. The amount of times you'll use iLoc compared to loc is very few. And moving forward, even in this entire class, I don't think there's even one instance that you have to use iLoc. We just like to make you aware that there is another way to do it, but it is index specific. So when I pass in my row and my column, I can pass in a value here for loc. For iLoc, I have to pass in the index value of 0 or 1. I want the row of 1 instead of, you'll see how loc works. So those are the main differences. Cool. Okay, so also reminding that when we are slicing, simply like I was saying earlier, it goes row, comma, column. So a row is one observation and a column is a variable or feature. So they do differ. Let's say that I wanted to look at my data. I want to use .loc. So I'm going to say, let's say new df .loc. And let's see how it works. Oh, I got to use my square brackets. Now I've created this filter here. I can say any sort of, I can identify which rows that I want to bring here. I want the survived filter. And what columns do I want to also bring? I can just do this. And if I do just this semicolon, it's going to give me all columns. So if I run this, this now gives me every value. I filtered out every value. 549 people perished because I passed in this filter where, remember, this filter gave me a Boolean response, right? Of true or false. What this is doing is I'm saying, go into my data frame. I want you to get me all of the rows where this filter is true, and then give me all of the associated columns. If I wanted to, I could pass in a specific column like sex, and it'll give me all of the ones, 549 still, that survived, and then what gender or sex they were. But if I wanted all of them, I can do the colon, and that'll give me every single column within this data frame. Any questions? I know this is a really important thing, so I want to go ahead and stop. If there's anything that you guys aren't quite understanding here, let me look at the chat. Somebody asked, what does the Boolean values of survived represent? I think it's 1 is survived, 0 is they perished.
You can add values into like arrays and things like this. It might be like ahead of ourselves, but could we change the 0 and 1 within this system to like generate like survived or not survived, instead of 0 or
Yeah.
1?
You could change your data if you wanted to. It would be dependent. Yeah. Like you could say, you would basically create a filter and then you would, yeah. So you could do that if you wanted to change it to where all 0s was not survived and then all 1s was survived. Yeah. That's part of cleaning data, which we'll deal with on Thursday.
I figured. And then the other thing was we keep referencing the new data field. Can we go, would it work with the old like data field? Or did we do something to
Because
create?
we specifically dealt with this new data frame right here.
Mhm.
we're saying with this new data frame. I could do it with an actual, let's see. I don't think
Could you
it'll work.
do the filter with the whole data set?
Yeah, I don't think it'll work. Maybe it will. Oh, yeah, it will.
Hmm.
Yeah, still has your 549.
Dope.
So you see now, because I had all columns, that it gives me every column now.
Mhm.
Now, one thing to note is what if I wanted the opposite? Right? What if I wanted all the survivors? Well, I could create a, this is not survived really, but I could create a survivor filter and a not survivor filter, or, and we love simplicity. If in front of survivor filter, I do the tilde, that is the key right above. So it's like right below the escape key. It's like the little squiggly line. It's called a tilde. If I do this, let's go ahead and try to see this little squiggly line. If I do this, that means not. So what that will do is that is saying all of the ones who did not, or where this is false. So if I run this, now you see all of the survived ones. So now we only have 342. So you don't have to create multiple filters. You can just do this guy right here if you want the opposite or the inverse. Now that only works obviously with binary filters. So if like survived or not survived, it doesn't work with, or I guess it would work with, if you wanted all the ones not named something or not 35. Yeah, actually that would work. So this is just the inverse of whatever this filter is. David asked, does the tilde function similarly to not equals? Yeah, it works similarly. It's just a quick tool in pandas that we can do to represent not or the opposite. Basically what it's doing is it's taking this filter and it's saying, instead of giving me all the values where that is true, I want you to give me the ones where that is false. If that makes sense.
So it basically just depends on, well, if you use a tilde, you're not like, specifying like an argument. You're just basically, specifying the opposite of the convention, right?
Yeah. So like, let's say we had something like age filter, where I wanted that to be equal to df of age is greater than, let's see, where's my greater than 35.
Okay.
Okay. And then let's just say age filter, age fillet. That's funny. If I see this, it's going to give me age filter is not defined. Oh, because I don't know how to spell, guys. Sorry. Okay. So this is going to give me all of the values that are greater than 35. I could say equals 35, right?
Okay.
But I could then just say, df dot loc, where I pass in not age filter. Now it's not anything specific, right? It's not specifically a different age, but it's just going to give me all the ones 35 and below. Or non, which is going to also count as not a number.
Okay.
Yep, and this is going to give me all of the ones where they were over 35, not even exactly 35. Because 35 is not greater than 35. So, any question on filtering? Somebody asked if the tilde only works in pandas. That's a great question. I'm not sure. How are we feeling on filtering? It's going to be really, really crucial. Now note, because I've got values here, I can say something like this. Let's try this. Because I got every single column, this is now giving me my mean. What if I wanted just age? I want the average. I want the mean of all of the people who are older than 35. And it is 46.97. Somebody asked us to clarify, we're doing more filtering on Tuesday, Thursday. Yep. We're gonna do more filtering so that way we can see how we can clean our data. Filtering is gonna be something that, you know, moving forward, this is what you'll do. This is a big portion of your belt exam. So I will make sure that, you know, we have ample time to filter and continue to practice. So great question there. This was just another one that if you wanted to, if you did want to have multiple columns. So here I just had like age. But if I wanted multiple columns, all you have to do is you throw them in a bracket. And that will allow it. You can also change values with loc. So here I've got df.loc. In this case, I'm filtering by Jerry. It's just the name. I'm saying I want the column of height. And specifically because I just have Jerry, I want to say that value is 77. So I can actually change those values. We're going to talk about that on Thursday, like changing values and cleaning our data.
Can you go up real quick back to where you had the 2 in the column? Yeah, right there. Stop. Go back down. Right, stop. So Jerry colon Hubert, right? I see that it included Hubert. So when you're doing that, it's inclusive. The end part is inclusive.
Yeah.
Okay. Because usually when you do the colon, it's non-inclusive.
Yeah, that's specifically because the index on this guy is the names. And so that's why it says Jerry and Hubert. But yeah, it's looking specifically for Hubert.
Okay.
Versus the value, like the iLoc, I see what you're saying. Like when we did our slice, it was all the way up to, but not including. In this case, this is saying I want the rows from Jerry all the way to Hubert, which Ann's included in that. And then the columns I want is height and state. And it returns this back. And then with the last 3 minutes, just want to show you, oops, I don't want to do that. So I want to show you iLoc. So if I use iLoc, I can pass in the actual value of 7. So this, if I say 7, that's going to give me the entire 8th row of my series, or as a series, but an entire 8th row because it starts from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's, if I say 7, that's actually the 8th row within my data frame, and it returns all of those values. Again, that is specific to if you know the index position of what you're trying to locate. I would say to default to using loc and getting used to your data and creating filters. Filters are going to be king, but it's also a possibility if this is how you want to do it. This is a possibility. Now, let's say this is the last thing I'm going to leave with you guys. Just that way you guys can really get started on your homework. If I wanted all of the ones, all of the survivors, this is going to be like I'm basically giving you a homework assignment question, but that's okay. If I want all of the survivors who are over 35, what I can do is I can say df.loc. I'm going to say survived filter and age filter. And this is going to get me specifically all of, so it's all of both, all the people that survived and are over the age of 35. Obviously, I could do the other way too. All the, well, that's a little bit morbid. I don't want all the people who died that are kids. But if I wanted the opposite, right? All the survivors that were under the age of 35, I just have my little tilde, and then now it gives me everybody 35 and younger that survived.
It will.
So you can't, yeah.
It's Adam. I just wanted to say, this is one of those places where commenting on your code helps, so that when it's reviewed, people, you know what the person's looking for, especially if you're working with the TAs.
Yeah,
Didn't mean to jump in there.
no, perfect. Something like this would be super helpful, right? Or all survivors younger than 35. You don't even have to be as wordy. But this is how you do multiple. You do this and. Right there. Any questions? And you do have access to, there's some stuff we didn't get to where we talk more about filtering. This is what we will talk about this. These are just filtering examples. So this is using iLoc right here. I can throw in, instead of creating a filter, I can throw in the value, but if you're going to reuse it, get used to creating a filter. Like if you do this, if you find yourself doing this more than once, create a filter. If you're just gonna do it one time, one off, that's fine. But if you're gonna do this more than once, create a filter. Please get used to creating filters. It's much, much, much easier. But then I do have all of this stuff that you can do as well. But we'll go, we'll talk about this on Thursday. Any questions for you, friends?
I have a quick question, Will.
Yeah, hit me with it.
So, I don't know if you can answer it or not, but it's, does this work for something like a date? Because I wrote that same code, but on the homework it's a date, so it's not just a set number that's like, okay, it's greater than this number.
So
Or is that
actually,
something
if it
else?
is, so something to check is if you do .info or D types and it is a date time object, you can do a grader. So that's a little hint for your
Okay.
homework. So if
Okay.
it is that type, you actually can do the grader, and so it should work. I think that for the homework that is the case, so you can do the grader and apply both
Okay,
filters.
thank you.
Yeah, for the bike assignment, the one that's like greater than
Yeah,
731.
yeah.
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 So because it is a date time object, then you actually can run this there. So should be
To add
fine.
on to that, for the daytime argument, if you're going to do like greater than date, just make sure you pass off the date as a string. So you want to put single quotations around that, so that way it makes the argument work.
Yep.
Like I said, I learned that the hard way, but hopefully that
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah. Way to go. Cool. Any other questions? Great questions today. Was today's class helpful? Do you feel overwhelmed? I know we kind of just like jumped in, just full send. Today helpful? Do you feel overwhelmed? How are we feeling?
Feel great.
Good. Are you guys getting it? Are you guys having fun with this? I hope that you're having fun and really nerding out over data. Get used to it. This is, and Adam can attest, everything you do moving forward, like 80% of your job is going to be data cleaning. Then you can get to like the analytics piece, the visualization, the machine learning, but like getting used to all of this is going to be super important, because this is the main part of the job, is cleaning data and dealing with data and preparing data and filtering and finding out what's important.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, friends. Well, that's all I got. We are 3 minutes over. As always, you have access to this on our sheet. So if there is anything I didn't go over tonight, but you did want to just sort of get a jump ahead, you can totally do that. It is available for you right here. And then I'll have the recording up as soon as this class is over. And that, I hope you guys have a wonderful night. I'll hang out here for the next 25 minutes ish. So if anybody does have any questions, I'm here to help. So is Adam. Hope you guys have a great night.